Strats, Les Pauls, and Stormbringer, the fantasy-fueled 80s guitar era for us Gen X people. You know, kids these days might not get it, but in 1982, the choice between a Stratocaster and a Les Paul wasn't just about brand loyalty. It was a personality test. You could look at a kid's guitar and know exactly who he was. And then once the tremolo arms showed up, it got religious.
Yeah, you're right. The Stratocaster had the 3 single coil pickups, and the Les Paul had the 2 double coils. So you kind of knew who wanted the heavier sound than who did not. But you also had the tremolo on the Stratocaster. So you almost had to have both.
We were both born in 66, and before we even had real guitars, we were swinging sticks and broom handles, pretending they were Strats and Les Pauls. By 7th or 8th grade, though, it seemed that everybody had a guitar, but only a handful of us treated them like Stormbringer. And by that, I mean the legendary sword of Elric of Melnibone, which was very big in my young heavy metal life as my sort of background fantasy. Troy, did you have, I don't know if you remember me talking about Elric. We mentioned him once already. We even had a comment about it. And I even named my first son's middle name Elric. You know, in fact, the first time my hands wrapped around a Strat neck, it felt like I've been waiting for me like from birth. It's kind of like it was a sword. You, Troy, on the other hand, you chose that thick tone, that heavy weight. I had a Strat. You went the sort of the Gibson route, the humbuckers. You could predict a kid's whole personality by which guitar he chose, I think, as you alluded to.
Yeah, I think it was the guitar players we looked up to as well. I liked the double coil. I think they're DiMarzio Super 70 pickups. When I built guitars, I'd throw 2 of those in, or 3 if I could.
Exactly. Yeah, and I don't know exactly how I ended up with Strat, you know, because I went from the Les Paul copy that I had in Memphis to the Dean ML, and then from that was a short-lived thing, and then that to the Fender Strat. And once I had a Strat in my hands from Guitar Center, which we'll have to have a whole episode just about Guitar Center's impact on all this.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, yeah. But once that happened, it's been nonstop since. Even though I've had other primary guitars along the way, it still, and it again today, is my Stratocaster. Troy, what was it about that beefy, heavier humbucker Gibson for the fatter body sound that attracted you?
I don't know what it was. I just liked it better. I didn't like the weight. And then after I got a hold of a Strat, I was like, wow, why can't they make a Les Paul this lightweight? But then I realized part of the sound had a lot to do with the weight of the guitar. I think what is it, sustain in the wood or something that made it like a lot beefier maybe?
Yeah, I think this is a topic for another day. The neck on a guitar on a Strat versus the neck on a Les Paul, the fundamental different feel of the two, and it is extremely noticeable coming from my side. I don't know if it's the same coming their side, but and we'll deep dive into that another time. But I want to keep moving on these top things that we look at. But you know, everybody started with a Peavey Classic. That was the neighborhood baptism. Once you got that, you were on your way. Then somebody got a Fender Twin, and suddenly practice felt official, special. But when somebody rolled a Marshall stack into the garage, it was prophecy. That meant somebody had just leveled up.
You're a rock star now. You got the Marshall. Some kids started in on, you know, I remember a guy down the street came in with the Ibanez Iceman. It was blue. Maybe it was a Greco, but it was blue. And I kind of liked that. It had the double coils. It looked like a Gibson Explorer, but it was just weird and it was heavy.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you knew you were a rock star when you had a Marshall stack, or somebody had a Marshall stack in the band.
As long as you could stand next to it, that was good enough, right?
Let me get a picture of me over here.
Not in front of my Frankenstein amp over there. Yeah, you know, when Tremolo hit, that really divided the camp. Suddenly you had Tremolo guitar players and not Tremolo guitar players, but you also had the Floyd Rose crowd versus the Kahl crowd. To me, the Floyd Rose crowd was more about dive bombs, woo, 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 and the Kahl crowd seemed more precision. Did you feel that way?
Yeah, I did. And it seems to me I got Kahl because they were cheaper, a little bit cheaper than Floyd Rose. And I mean, when people got a hold of the Floyd Rose, the dive bombing was huge. Everybody did it, and you know, hitting harmonics and diving with those because you knew you could do it because it wasn't going to go out of tune. I had remember Mighty Mite used to make guitars, and I made one of those. I had a one single coil, double coil pickup towards the bridge, and it had just a tremolo, didn't have the nut up at the top. and you dive bombing that, and you had to retune it every time. So when the Floyd Rose came out, it was time to bomb.
Absolutely. That was, I did never, I did not get the Floyd Rose. I ended up with, I had a Kahler and put on the Strat. And with that and the Crybaby, man, I was on my way. And how about this? Remember how important, we talked about when we had the one on the Sears catalog thing, we talked about the, it said with built-in fuzz. And we are like, that's what they used to call distortion. But then distortion became overdrive. And remember things like the Tube Screamer when that thing hit?
I never got one because even as a young kid, it was too much.
Yeah, right. But if you had that and the Marshall stack,
Yeah, holy cow.
you're on your way. Floyd Rose just poof happens.
It's amazing.
Right. Somebody's got really cool parents, right?
Right. You're in the band. I don't
That's
care if you
right.
can play.
That's right. Stand by the Marshall. Yeah, you just stand by your Marshall stack and do something. You bleach blonde your hair and look into a dryer. Yeah, that was something else, though. But, people think that we're joking when we talk about how fantasy shaped us. I talked about Stormbringer the way that I did. But, what kind of things out there in the world sort of the time you grew up in or otherwise sort of shaped your music?
For me, it shaped the music. Like I always like doing originals more because, when you're, kids are going through that same where their voices have changed, you couldn't ever find a good singer. So just writing songs, doing my own thing shaped where I went musically. And I also did not want to I didn't want to sound like anybody else. So I kind of, what did limit me is I didn't want to learn how to play anybody's songs. I didn't want to know how to do that. So I was kind of learning by myself and really, I don't know, didn't really progress much in guitar because of that.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at that because yeah, we're coming back to that one. But yeah, the self-taught guitar player versus the one that took lessons versus the one
Yeah.
that writes originals versus the one that takes lessons and gets the tab and plays everything note for note for note,
Yeah.
or there's a lot. That's a whole nother topic we're going to get back to, the
Yeah.
style, the play, and how we got there. But every garage band was its own unique government. Who sings, who leads, who's late, who's quits, all the while trying to get a half a decent sound together out of concrete basement. But man, the first local gig, it felt like conquering a city. What did you feel like, Troy, the first time you played out live?
Oh, I was so nervous. And then, because there were like bands that you looked up to that were out in the audience that you did not want to make a mistake. And there's a kind of a rivalry amongst the neighborhood bands too. And if you had a band that you looked up to came to see you, you're nervous. And then they came up afterwards and they're like, hey, you guys sound great. How did you do that? It just felt so good to see the guys you looked up to think you're just doing awesome.
Yeah, I remember it was one thing we were playing at the Rusty Nail in Chicago back in, it was either late 83 or early 84 when I was playing with Blitzkrieg. And it was just us that night. We were headlining ourselves. And so it was a pre-show. And the way that the front door of the place right next to it was a hollowed out area that had a door. And that's effectively the backstage. So you could basically hear everybody coming in. And then you had to once you left, you had to walk out of the side room here, past the bar, through the crowd to the stage. And so as we were sitting in there, we heard somebody say, hey, man, Paradox is here. And at the time, Paradox was one of the big, there was another one, Diamond Head or something like that. There were the big like heavy metal bands that were in that high school, went all of the Battle of the Bands type of thing. That
Right.
went from like, they were out of high school, but they were still kicking ass in all the high school anytime like that. So they were really, really good. And they were there to check us out. And so I started talking smack. I was talking loud enough so they could hear me over the wall. I was like,
No.
man, we're going to really show them tonight how to play blah, blah. I was just like getting cocky as hell. And we went out there and we played a hell of a show. A couple of years ago, in 2019, I was with the singer, Danny Schaefer, same guy. Hadn't seen him in so long. He told me that night Paradox was there trying to see if they wanted to get me to come play guitar for them because they were looking for a guitar player. The rest of the Blitzkrieg knew that. They did not tell me that so that I would not know that. And that when I opened my mouth and talked shit, I fired myself.
Oh boy. Thanks, friends.
Who knows, man? I could have wound up in some goofy video in 96 or in 86,
Yeah.
like this, with the little wristbands on. Not the right kind with the spikes, the kind with like the red, white, and blue, and all that crap. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, one thing I've also noticed is when you look at Gen X YouTubers, a lot of them across the board, doesn't matter. Sometimes you talk about crypto, you could be talking about finance, you could be talking about whatever, but there's usually a guitar on the wall, or some form of Marshall stack, or maybe a Fender. Usually the Marshall like radio they have now, the Bose radio thing that looks like a Marshall amp, might be Marshall itself. But you don't see Ampeg, you don't see Peavey, you don't see any of those other things. Gen X just sticks by those things. I mean, it's just crazy how many people have that. Have you noticed that, Troy?
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely had to have a Marshall, and once you got it, it was embarrassing to see a Peavey on a stage.
Right. I'm sorry for you Peavey fans out there. And it's a
Yeah,
great amp and
yeah,
all, but I mean,
sorry.
come on. You know, I don't know. I don't even know what to say there, but
I love my Peavey.
I loved my Peavey too when I would, when it was the hot thing and everybody had to have a phaser.
Yeah, let's play some disco with our phaser.
But yeah, I see that might be what sort of helped kill that. Well, that and a lot of other things that we're going to talk about as we continue this conversation in other ways going forward. We've talked today about, we want to talk about some of the influences and the way they influenced it in the ways that we did here today. We want to talk about the arrival of Guitar Center. And we also want to talk about then later, for some of us, as it moved into adulthood later proper, how even ordering things online has changed and the availability of things, and particularly the custom made guitars out there. And maybe we'll even get our old friend Kevin on the show, who is he creates fabulous basses these days. They sell for top dollar. And he was the bass player of the band that Troy and I talk about, Enemy, back in the early 80s. So we got to see if we can get Mr. Butler on here. I bet he'd do it. What do you think, Troy?
I think he would. Give him
There
some
you go.
advertisement time, yeah.
We're going to
He's
share
got
this
great
with
bass,
him.
makes beautiful basses, man.
I know. You know my love for Alembic guitars and the Alembic I owned. I look at them and I'm like, wow, he's like the bass equivalent. Kevin, we're going to send you a link to this. So, hey, how's it going? Sorry, I didn't mean the bottle to hit next to the dumpster back in Troy. You remember that story?
Yeah, I do.
Sorry,
I do.
I'm still running. See, I'm all the way in South America, man. You can't get me down here. You like that? Start swimming, pal. Watch out for the Navy. The U.S. Navy's in the way, so watch out. So, all right, folks, that's going to be end for the end of this video here. We hope you enjoyed this. If you do like this kind of comment, please feel free to reach out below, comment. As I said before, we've had a lot of comments already. I can see that we're connecting with some people on that. We want to hear from you. It's just us talking, but we're talking with you. We're trying to all of us to remember about all these times and how much fun and how much just brings us back to ourselves, back in those good days. There's no problem with that. We're not bypassing anything. We can open our eyes and go right back to Fox News or CNN if we want to. But for right now, we're just reminiscing about the good old days. So Troy, until next time, anything else to add to our Gen X transplant bro family?
I got nothing. Marshall.
All right. What was that? Marshall?
Marshalls.
Marshall. Gen X, baby, all the way. All right, folks, until next time, take care, man.